Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening to the Totally Driven Entertainment Radio Network.
In the future, none of you are heroes. You're legends.
Get driven, stay driven.
May it be an evening star shine down upon you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bareback Facts. I am your host, Dallas Duclos, and with me today, I have a special guest. I have Kimberell Eventide of the YouTube channel High Elven Wisdom. Kimberell, how you doing?
My Gavanan, Dallas, how are you?
I am well. Can you tell my listeners what you just said and what it means?
Yes, it means well met, my friend, in Elvish, in Tolkien's Elvish, Sindarin. And it's just how elves greet each other. And you can actually hear it in the Lord of the Rings movies when Heldar talks to Aragorn when they first meet in the forest of Lothlorien.
Right. Okay, so now that I have you here, get into it. Let's get into it. You've got a great YouTube channel. You do a lot of stuff on YouTube. You do a lot of videos. You got a lot to talk about. So we've got a lot to talk about. I want to give people a better understanding of what you're into. First things first, though, I'm going to get to some of the things that I noticed in one of your videos, in a couple of your videos. You've mentioned some of your influences, and I want to get to those first. And then I want to ask you a question about those influences. So first off, I want to ask you, you mentioned that you have been influenced by texts such as the Bhagavad Gita, the work of the poet Khalil Gibran, and grimoires from various Wiccan practitioners, as well as, of course, obviously, the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. So what other texts would you say have helped shape your lens for the world around you?
What other texts?
Yeah.
You know, I'm the type of person I can gather any kind of wisdom from whatever I read. So that is a long list, Dallas. As far as books, I actually have a video that talked about how I have several books that I've read and that really helped me with my awakening. As far as, well, I have read the majority of the world religious books, and those are always very enlightening. And also Rumi's poems and poetries are always very good. I would say The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and also anything from the Kundalini and the Chakras, Genevieve Lewis Poulsen. You know, I am somebody who reads a lot of different types of style of books. Amit Goswami, Where God is Not Dead. That is a very interesting book about quantum physics. So as you can see, I mean, basically I'm always reading books that are going to help to just bring information to me and affirm some of my ideas about the universe and about consciousness and the reality that is around us.
So in a way,
like,
go ahead. Yeah, go. No,
I was just going to say I also really enjoy books that inspire the idea that love is the center of all things, and I think that's where Rumi's teachings and philosophies and Khalil Gibran's really took hold of me, as well as Tolkien's. So those are the type of books that I will always be very interested in. I do try to branch out and read other books that are a little bit more different, maybe a little bit more of like playing the devil's advocate. You know, I have books on my shelf like why are there so many murders, you know, in the world, and criminal case books and things like that, because I am also not only just interested in the light side of this world and humanity, but also trying to understand more of the dark side. What are the dark desires inside of humans? What drives them to do the things that they do? I'm always searching to understand more and go deeper. So those are the type of books I'm interested in.
Right, so,
a lot.
Yeah. So what this kind of exemplifies to me, the words of Buddha, what we think we become. So what
Absolutely.
is it that initially drew you to the work of J.R.R. Tolkien? Because J.R.R. Tolkien is considered to be, by many, to be probably one of the foremost writers of fantasy literature to have ever lived. And his work, of course, was taken up in his death by his son, who finished the Silmarillion for him. But ultimately, Tolkien is considered to be the benchmark as far as fantasy literature goes. So what is it that drew you to the work of Tolkien specifically?
Like everybody who gets into Tolkien, I think they're read The Hobbit or one of the books as a child, introduced into their lives at a young age, as I was, and it stays with you. And when you watch the movies and when you go back and you read them when you're able to, when your reading gets a little bit better and your comprehension is there, you sense something within yourself. You sense that there's deeper messages to it. It's not just a fantasy book. I would say that it is a roadmap to deep psychology and the philosophies that Tolkien had about humanity. And that is absolutely what draws me. It's not just fairy tales or legends of old that can be considered myths. It is a look, it's a window, it's a mirror into our own reality, and the characters actually symbolize certain parts of ourselves.
Well, I think one thing that a lot of people would say is that you can almost take any large portion of literature and gain that sort of insight into it as far as characters being stand-ins for specific parts of the human psyche. Now, Tolkien himself specifically drew on a number of pieces of literature that predated him by a great span of years, specifically the Ring Saga, Das Nibelungenlied, the Volsunga Saga, and of course the Edda, both the poetic and prose version. His work is incredibly influenced by Norse mythology and Celtic paganism.
Yes.
So one of the things that I would like to ask you, I suppose, is have you read any of these texts, which many would be many who studied Tolkien or read his work would consider to be his primary sources, despite the fact that these are in fact epics or free-form poetry. These are still would have been his primary sources in constructing the narrative that he constructed.
I'm getting to it. The problem is that I am doing so much, and I'm not just focused on Tolkien. So I am getting to it, and that is absolutely something that I really wanted to start doing, is reading some of the Norse mythology that he spoke about, and where he got the inspirations for the Valars and just his creation myth and how he saw things in regards to Norse mythology and why he came up with his own kind of Anglo-Saxon type of mythology to kind of mirror that as well. So I absolutely am going to get to that, and that will be a video one day.
Well, one thing that should be taken into account when viewing the Norse mythology and in the way that Tolkien framed it is that Tolkien is not necessarily framing it in the context of an Anglo-Saxon perspective. Tolkien is attempting to capture these stories, but take from them their essence. And the essence of these myths and this mythos within Norse mythology specifically is the very, very primal concept that man is constantly at war with nature, but he is also constantly at war with himself. So these are primarily at the heart of all Norse sagas is this concept of man versus himself and man versus nature. These things, but also the attempt to find that attunement with nature. Tolkien attempts to capture that, and he attempts to capture the cycle that exists within Norse mythology. For if you're not as familiar with Norse mythology runs in a cycle, and that cycle is an eventual destruction and then rebirth. So through various forms.
I do like the Thor
Ragnarok
movies.
is one of those. The Thor movies.
I love them.
So, something to consider moving forward. Now, one thing I've noticed is that you pulled from a lot of different pots so to speak, in your construction of your own construction of what many would consider to be a religious idea or a syncretic ideology that you're pulling together. So one thing I just
I'm not religious.
have to ask you.
I'm
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One
I'm
thing
not
I
religious.
do have to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're not religious. One thing I do have
I'm
to ask
spiritual.
you is, okay, you're spiritual. Are you averse to the concept of organized or more mainstream, quote-unquote, processes of explaining the universe, i.e., Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc.? Are you averse to these ideas of a more organized and systematic form of belief?
Yes. So I have always been aware of the idea. As soon as I came into the world and started to form my own sense of spirituality, I have always been aware of the idea that men, mainly men, in charge, and also some women in charge of these organizations, they have misunderstood or they have gathered information from the religions from an ego perspective, meaning their own culture, their own nation, their own personal identities. And that is actually what has fostered the division between religions. So I absolutely think that the organized religions in the world are flawed in a sense. Now, of course, there's always, exceptions to the rules. There's universalism, Christianity, which is really up and coming. And as far as I know, they are taught that there's truth in all religions and, the Baha'i faith and things like that. But generally, organized religion, what it does is it tries to say only our way is right and others are wrong, and you are following the right way. And what I have come to understand, going deeper into my subconscious, really being an empath and feeling other people's energy and looking into their lives and observing humanity in that kind of way, I have absolutely seen that no, there are more than one path towards enlightenment, towards becoming one with our prime creator, which people call God in many languages. So I am actually part of, you'll see in a lot of my videos, I'm actually part of, I guess, the team, you can say, or the group of souls that are on Earth that are trying to kind of break down that old system of organized religion. Not in a way of taking away their power necessarily, but allowing people to understand that, that's fine if you choose that particular path and that religion, but it's time for you to find your interconnection to other religious paths. It's time for you to see that others can take another path and they also can get to that same destination that you are trying to reach.
So one thing I do have to ask you, because you do talk about the Bhagavad Gita, you do talk about these sources. One of the core aspects of Hinduism, which is an organized religion, it's a religion that's over 6,000 years old, making it therefore probably the oldest religion that's still practiced today, at least organized religion as far as that goes. But at its core is the concept that you just described is, in essence, is that there is no one single path to truth, and that each individual must find their own truth. But how do you separate yourself from that? How do you then separate yourself from Hinduism, or do you feel the need to separate yourself from Hinduism? Because this is a very core aspect of Hinduism.
How do I separate myself from Hinduism? I don't.
How would you say? Okay, so you do not separate yourself from it. Okay.
No, I do not. So you know how Gandhi says, I'm Christian, I'm a Jew, I'm a Muslim, I'm all these things? That's exactly how I feel. I feel that I can look at every religion and I can find myself in every religion. I actually see myself in every part of the religion. And possibly this has to do with, I've always been a holistic type of thinker where I can look at the bigger picture of things. I'm not so detail oriented in that sense. But I don't focus on the culture, norms, the nation, the things that are attached to the religion that talks about the different rituals or traditions that people do within those religions that they claim as their own, I don't look at that. I can separate that, and I can find the deeper spiritual truth. I can find the truth of Krishna talking to Arjuna and saying that if you focus on me, you will reach enlightenment and bypass all the physical illusions of the world in a sense, and you won't be tied down. So I look at those kind of messages, and I see myself in all religions. I wish I could teach it to others, and I'm trying my best to do it.
So one of the aspects that you also mentioned, as far as organized religion goes, or the mainstream, quote unquote, is this idea of an ordering. But even the most free-form religions today do still attempt at an ordering, a way of organizing society, and a way of organizing the universe.
Ugh.
So
it's terrible.
Yeah, it's what one might call a necessary evil. It's part of the human spirit, I think, to attempt to control and organize things and categorize things. As people love
it's power.
Categories.
It's power. It's power.
We want to be in control of that of our universe as much as possible. So do you find yourself having to avoid those pitfalls as you progress in what you're attempting to do? You find yourself having to grapple with those pitfalls at all?
I see no order. I see no hierarchies, no order in that sense. It's all completely on an equal level playing field. That is how I see all souls in the universe. That is how I see all paths. What I do see is the difference between darker paths and the lighter paths. And what that means is the darker paths tend to hold people back from experiencing joy and bliss. And, they get involved with things that are going to make them forget who they are inside, the divine light inside, as the Gita talks about. As far as order goes, I don't see it. And in fact, if you read the Gita and you really understand it, you understand that there is no caste system, that was simply made later on by the humans that took over that religion and said, this is our religion and this is how the order is going to be, and the priests are at the top and people are on the bottom, and this is how it is. There's always been people that have kind of taken, I don't really understand where they get that permission to do so, but there's always been those type of souls that come into this world and they feel that they can take control of everything and control others. And keep them below them in order to service them and keep them working, to provide for them so that they don't have to work as much and they actually receive more of the rewards of wealth and power. And it's just wrong, and that's just how humans have organized religion and other parts of, humanity's organizations and structures, and it's wrong, and something I'm going to speak about a lot in my videos.
So returning back to this concept within Hinduism that I want to get to is this idea of Atman, something that a lot of people may not be familiar with, but I am familiar with, and it is essentially this heightened form of enlightenment that one might refer to as oneness with the Creator, oneness with all that is and all that ever could be in the universe. When one reaches their Atman, one reaches the highest form of enlightenment that one can achieve. You have been able to surpass your karma, you have broken the karmic cycle, and you have been able to reach beyond your mortal form into a higher sense of purpose. In essence, a sense of tranquility and oneness with all creation. Do you see yourself reaching towards this potential, and do you see that potential in others?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am an example of a soul that is in this world today that seeks to liberate itself from the physical cycles. I have woken up to know that I have been here before. I've done this before. I've been through the forgetting and remembrance and the pain and the suffering, and I am ready to reach for something more. So whatever it is about my past lives or anything that has happened to me before I came into this one, I am on that journey to do that. And I absolutely do believe that everybody has that true potential, because the Atman, in that sense of reaching oneness and letting go of all karma and becoming one, is essentially where we become our true selves. Because I have awakened to the fact that we are all experiencing life in this physical form, but on a conscious level and an energetic level, we are just really energy, and we go back to that source that we came from. We all come from kind of this prime consciousness, and it divides itself for a temporary time until we're called back. And I truly do believe that, and I've seen that in my own life, and I've seen it in others. I know that I am meeting a lot of souls these days that are interested in reaching that point. So I do believe that I'm not the only one that is searching for that. And
what would you
the
say?
Hindu.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing about the Hindu wisdoms that were passed down. I said it in one of my videos about the chakras. It just kind of came to me intuitively. This type of information was given to humans by extraterrestrials. They were not humans, and they came in the form of basically light bodies or actual real true beings. I mean, maybe Krishna really was a blue-skinned being that he is depicted as in all art that we see within the Hindu religion. I absolutely do believe that this information came from a higher dimensional source, and it's really it's kind of a big brother, big sister helping out the little brother, little sister situation, where they have been here before. They've been there before maybe billions of years, and they saw humanity as a young civilization starting out. And because they have evolved to the point where they love everything, they're one with the universe, they know that in essence they have to help us out. They have to help humanity out, because we are them and they are us.
One thing I would like to bring in here at this moment is this concept that is often associated with religion and mythology, and the best way that I can frame it is, when we, as young scholars, are studying religion, in order to study religions objectively, it's important to take into mind the following statement: that religion are the big stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves to ourselves, and that it is not necessarily important whether or not we ourselves believe in somebody else's story, but it is important that they believe in their story. Now, so whenever I had to grapple with any religious ideology that I was unfamiliar with or I found very foreign to me, this was the mantra that you were sort of given to deal with this idea, so that you could attempt to wrap your mind around these concepts, that you could attempt to get a better understanding, a feel for these religious ideologies. Now, with that being said, one of the major concepts within every religion is the use of metaphor. And metaphors run rampant through almost every major religious text that exists. The Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Vedas are no exception to this. When they describe heavenly battles, oftentimes these are often seen, including by many religious scholars, as metaphorical battles. Battles that exist within the human psyche. These battles for good and evil, for example, that exist in Tolkien, are often representative of battles that are taking place within the human psyche. For example, we look at Frodo's actual struggle with the ring in Tolkien's saga of Frodo and the companions taking the ring to Mordor. There are numerous occasions in which Frodo finds himself weighted down by the ring. It tears away at him. It wears him down. It makes him tired. It makes him burdened. Now, to a person that is not familiar with the concept of a metaphor, this would make them believe that this ring is, in fact, doing all these things to him, that this ring possesses otherworldly qualities, and that it is wearing him down. When a person more familiar with the concept of a metaphor is grappling with this concept. However, we are getting a much different picture. And I'm wondering if you can truck with me on this. This picture that we get when we examine this from a metaphorical standpoint, or a more philosophical standpoint, if you will, is that the ring itself is not doing anything to Frodo. It is not the ring. It is the way that he is viewing the ring, the way that he is viewing his responsibility to his companions, the way that he is viewing his responsibility and his personal struggle with this quest that he has found himself in. His responsibility is to carry this ring to its ultimate destruction. He is told at the beginning of his quest that this ring is the source of all that is evil in his world, and that only by destroying it can he rid the world of this evil. This is a tremendous amount of pressure, but nonetheless, it forms a great metaphor, a metaphor for a number of things. The burdens that we ourselves carry through life can be heavily referenced back to this concept, that the journey that Frodo is on is not only a physical journey, but a spiritual journey. And I wonder if that's sort of what you're trying to get at when you talk about these beings within the concept of, Krishna or some of these other beings. I wonder if that's what we as people are trying to get at when we talk about gods and we talk about goddesses. Are they not representations of what we ourselves see the potential for ourselves to become? And do they not represent these emotions that exist within us? A key example of this would be the Greeks too, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
So, Dallas, I have looked at everything from a balanced point of view, in the sense that everything is happening internally as well as externally. Okay, so there's always that as below, so above, yin yang. It's always that balance, outside, inside. The way that I see it is exactly how you described, as far as the internal struggle, the internal, metaphors and things like that to help us achieve whatever we're supposed to do in terms of our own personal journeys. However, there's also the other side, which is the physical part of the universe, which is still very much real. So aliens that have been thought of as gods and goddesses in the past, and now, as you can see, if you go on YouTube, I think probably the number one topic right now, because we're in 2018, is the idea of starseeds and aliens, and people are, really interested in that, because that's where we're heading, in a sense. We're trying to find other civilizations out there, and we're trying to make contact in that sense, and trying to understand our origins more. So what I have come to understand is that, yes, aliens represent kind of an internal type of representation, the gods and goddesses of the past that have come here for humanity and taught them things. They represent that within us, of what we've always been able to achieve. But when humanity is searching for answers and is creating that vortex of energy, which is thoughts, and are really striving to look for something beyond themselves, in answer to that comes a physical manifestation of beings from other worlds. Because we're kind of all playing, consciousness is one thing, but so it's this dream of the universe that's going on, and whatever you think of at the moment, it creates the energy that will then call and make something align to the other energy that you're pulling into your life. So if humanity is searching for answers outside of themselves and they're looking to the stars all the time, and that's what they were, the pyramids were built pointing to the stars. We have proof that ancient civilizations were always looking to the stars for answers. They were always looking to see what else is out there. In answer to that, because we needed that in terms of for humanity's own spiritual and evolution growth, and to understand that they're not alone, that's when the physical manifestation of aliens came in. So they do represent an internal part of ourselves, but they're also very much real in their own experience and reality. That's how I see it. So I see it as both sides Delius, like, very balanced in that sense.
Well, this conversation is really getting fascinating. But before we continue, we're going to take a commercial break, and you and I will continue to converse, in private if you like. But when we come back, we're gonna get to some more questions. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you have come to view the universe and your take on philosophy and how religion, how organized religions are tackling things, and how you would do it differently.
Sounds good.
I'm Black Man, saving mankind, one stereotype at a time.
I'm going to message you privately real quick on Facebook, and you'll want to turn your headphones down or phone down, because this is going to be very loud.
Yeah, okay.
Will
Yeah.
Black Man
Can you
make
still
it
hear
to the
me?
crime on time?
Yep.
Or will
Okay,
he be
good.
on CPT?
Yeah. During the
Stay
commercial,
tuned at ChrisFraleyPresents.com.
I just tend to let the commercials go and give that person a chance to catch the rep. But since I've got you on private messenger, I'm just going to message you until the thing is over, and we can continue to converse, and we can go back over some of these things as well, whatever we talked about there as well, if you don't mind, if you're not averse to that.
Yeah, no problem.
Just
How
give us something
am I doing?
to chew for the next minute or two.
Stay driven with Totally Driven Entertainment.
Are you a fan of Sherlock Holmes? Letters from Holmes offers unique, one-of-a-kind letters from the world-famous detective himself. Handwritten on 8.5-inch by 11-inch aged parchment paper and using smudge-free ink to produce original, high-quality letters that fans will treasure for years to come. Each letter is handcrafted and written from the perspective of Sherlock Holmes,
more fleshed
mimicking
out.
Holmes'
I want people
native
to see
tongue
that you've
and
got some
embracing
balance
many of
to
the
you.
famous detectives' quirks, quips, insults, and peculiarities. Order a love letter,
Yeah, and
birthday
if we can
greeting,
go back,
personal correspondence, or
I would
more.
love to talk
Only
about
at
the idea of the internal and external battle that Tolkien talks about.
For $5
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. We can get back to that.
Few slices of pizza. $5 still takes you a long
Shortly,
way.
we can definitely do that.
$5 can buy your child a bag of
because Tolkien does have a lot to say about the internal battle that people struggle through. But one of the things that I want to bring up too at some point is one of the major themes within Tolkien's work is death and mortality. That's probably in large part probably the biggest theme within his work. And you can argue the point if you want when we come back, but I think arguably that's probably one of the biggest themes within his work. Is death and our struggle to grapple with that grief
And it's my
death.
goal, and I talk about it several times in my videos. Like I know death. I lost my mom at a young age. So my goal is also, because I've healed myself and understanding a little bit about death in that sense. My goal is to help others get a sense of peace, in a sense, like where they don't have to fear death. Like as John Lennon said, that we just kind of go into one car and go into another.
Right. One way I think it's been a great way to do that, and so many people have kind of challenged this concept of death. Death is that. It's how you define it, really, is how you define death. Are we referring to a physical death, which in the case of Tolkien, he's referring to both a physical death but also a spiritual death, because the elves themselves within Tolkien's work are shadows of their former selves by the time the Lord of the Rings is taking place. They are not the civilization that they once were.
No, but there's a sense of and there's like a sense of peace within them. I feel like I personally.
But guys, we're back. We were having a nice little chat during the break. We're back, and now that we are back, we're going to get back on track. So one of the things I wanted to get to, and we'll get to what we talked about on the break after this question. Once we get done with it, but you mentioned a number of times in your videos that you possess an elven soul. So do you refer to some source of untapped information or power like the Akashic records, which many people have referred to, or some other source of illumination or information that you have discovered on your own introspection? Or are you referring to a sense of self-discovery, a sense of self-enlightenment, much like the Buddha would have said? Remember when Buddha returns back from his fast and from his meditations, that when he's asked if he is God, he simply says, "No, I am awake." He does not confirm that he is God.
Right.
So,
because you cannot, as an individual, you cannot refer to yourself as God, but you can refer to the collective. We are all God, because that's truly when you realize that you are awake, that you yourself as an individual are not God, but we together, and that's why we're in this experience, we are God. But so to answer that idea, it's both.
Okay.
An elven soul is, so I have discovered that as a personal journey, but then my acute observation on the world and meeting different people and looking into the past legends of the Tuatha De Danann, the Irish, the Celtic
you refer to,
fairy
okay,
tribe.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're referring to Tuatha De Danann. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for doing that. Yes,
it's a mouthful.
Truly is. It is such a mouthful, and I try to spin it in an Elvish way, but it's hard to say when you're American. But yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is that I believe that I have some kind of past, part of all those folk tales and legends and fairy tales, that I was part of that tribe. I'm kind of awakening to that. So I feel that there's a very real reality about elves, and that they have been here, and that's why they were spoken about for so long, and now they're not here anymore. They've moved on, in a sense. And so
go ahead.
I feel I'm part of that. I feel that my soul feels that it's part of that. Something that kind of keeps coming to me is the idea that I have, in this lifetime, I do have Celtic Druid, a Druid past. My father's last name is Lennon, and Lennon is Gaelic for little cloak, that denotes priesthood, but it's Gaelic, it's Celtic, so there's priesthood in there. And my dad is he's very Druid-like in a sense of, the way that he has taught me things. So I do feel that there's some kind of connection there, that I had this elven soul, and I believe, and I've said this before, and I've talked about this with some of my other elvenkins, those that relate to the elves and feel really close to the elves and feel they are an elf in this life. I believe that once you are an elf, you kind of remain that way. It's just how your energy is in the universe, because I think anybody who gets to the elven soul and they connect to nature, because nature is divine, it's perfect in all its imperfections, and it runs on the cycle, and it holds deep wisdom. I think anybody who gets to the awakening and understanding that they have been an elven soul, they feel or they sense that they have always kind of been an elf, even though it's taken a while to get to that point of their awakening, but it might symbolize some kind of past lives. So in this life, I identify as an elf, and in the past, I also feel like I was an elf. So it's both.
Well, one thing I want to get into, and I'm glad you brought this up, but one thing I do want to ask about is you're familiar with, you seem to be very, at least passingly familiar with the Tuatha De Danann and the Fir Bolg. These individuals, these groups of people that you're referring to, symbolically refer to the first settlers of Ireland. Tuatha De Danann are said to have been among the first peoples to have settled Ireland, and they have various heroes like Nuada, the Silver Hand, And of course, they do have the discrepancy that lies within their mythos is that there is a goddess that is carried from mainland Europe to Ireland, and that goddess is the Morgan. And so she is lumped in with the Tuatha De Nan, and the Tuatha De Nan are then elevated from the point of just simply being the resident guys who conquered the land from whatever inhabitants happened to be there to gods and the ancestors of the first Irish. And among them, they have other groups such as the Fir-Bolg. The Fir-Bolg are another group, another tribe of people. There are a number of these, but the Fir-Bolg and the Tuatha De Nan are particularly significant because they are referred to in the Ulster cycle. They are referred to in that. They were referred to in the legend of Cuchulainn, which happens to be probably the most famous story outside of the legend of Finn MacCool in Ireland.
Yeah.
And so these individuals, the only one true issue that I find in identifying them with elves is that the concept of an elf is not exclusively Germanic, nor is it exclusively Celtic. It's somewhere in between. It's sort of a concept that's been passed back and forth, and so to speak. And thus, so is the concept of fairies. For Germans, fairies are a little bit complicated. They're more like tricky little spirits that play pranks and do cutesy things, sour my milk and whatnot. But for the Irish, fairies represent something entirely different. In fact, for the Celts in general, fairies represent something entirely different, and as do elves. Before we go further with this, I'm just letting you know. I'm sure you do have some passing familiarity with this, but I'm just letting the viewers know what the differences are. Now, for those of you not familiar with the concept of an elf within the German context, there are roughly two kinds, and one of them has often been conflated as being dwarves, but this is a later conflagration that comes out of being mistranslated, and those are the Svartalfheimer. But there are the Alfar. The Alfar are individuals who are supposed to be fair-skinned. They come out of the Norse myths, and they are said to be among the first actual gods within the Norse myth. They simply fade away with the arrival of the more familiar Norse gods, the burly Thor and Odin and all those fancy gods that everybody's so happy with today. Now, within the German
really
context...
Yeah.
Right. It's almost a placeholder for a lot of these. But yeah. But when you look at elves within the German context, later interpretations of elves become much more predatory. Elves are a little more within the Germanic context in later ages more than nature spirits or voracious kidnappers of children and the like. They become very mischievous entities that exist outside of time. Now, within the Celtic context, elves are far more complicated, as are fairies. Now, you mentioned the Fae a number of times, and you mentioned the idea of this other world that exists within Celtic myth, and it's a world that's been vastly misinterpreted by most people outside of studying Celtic mythology and Celtic culture. The concept of the other world is almost the concept of an afterlife, but not quite. It is a place that exists outside of time and does not refer to necessarily a place of death or eternal life, but it is a place where the rules that we as people, the way that we see them, do not apply. It is an uninterpretable plane of existence where supernatural entities are said to reside. Now, these entities are often referred to as the Fae or the Fairy or the Fair Folk, and this has often been conflated with elves, but elves are simply one of these groups. So I guess my question to you, specifically about this conceptualization of the elf, as far as it goes, is do you see your interpretation as being more of the swarthy Germanic variety of a more nature-oriented spirit that is both very hyper-sexualized and hyper, fantasized and fetishized within German culture, because it is very much so? Or do you see this opposite side within the Celtic mythos, and that is this mischievous, more mysterious and alluring entities that can't really be comprehended and really fully accurately explained because there simply isn't enough written about it?
So that's a very complicated question. So the thing is about elves and fairies is there is duality within them. Okay, so you have the sprites, you have the fairies, you have lower vibrational entities that like to play tricks and manipulate humans and things like that, because that's just where they are and what they have designed to be or created to be or designed themselves to be in that sense. And then you have other types of spirits and fairies and elves that are going to be more helpful and are going to be, of the light of creation in a sense. So the way that I see myself is kind of an evolved form of what the mythos talked about within the Celtic legends and things like that. So when I talk about having an elven past, that what I mean about that and how I'm starting to view past lives is that you don't come into this incarnation just like that. You take in all your experiences that you've had, and you are the sum total of your experience in every new life that you have. So in this life, I am an evolved form of that, where I don't see myself as a god. I don't see myself as mischievous. I don't want to play tricks on humans. I want to help humans. I want them to get in touch with nature more, and I want them to connect to their divine light inside. That is how I see myself. So in a sense, I have evolved too. If I had an elven past, if I was part of that fairy realm in a sense, I am now evolved where I'm trying to help humans. So that's kind of how I see things. That I believe that even from your past, you do not come into this new life just with that, just with those skill sets or that past memory. You are actually you're trying to evolve from that past as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess the next thing, I want to get back to what we were talking about on the break. I want to get back to what you wanted to talk about is in regards to Tolkien, and I know you remember what we were talking about. So I want you to take that back. We were talking about Tolkien over the break, and we talked about some of the themes within his work, and I brought up the fact that death and the concept of death are central. And almost an integral part of his work, because in a sense, Tolkien is trying to conquer that in his text. He's not. Well, I don't want to say conquer. He's trying to encapsulate the very real struggle that we people have with death, because for many people, death is scary. Death is a very scary thing, and depending on what you believe. Death can be great. It can be, eternal happiness and in heaven or in Shangri-La or wherever you happen to be going. Or it can be eternal damnation if that's what you believe in. It could be nothingness. It could be anything the mind wraps around. But one thing that is particularly unnerving about the concept of death is uncertainty and the end of possibility. So we were talking about this over the break, and I wanted to get back to that because I know you wanted to talk about these things. So why don't we bring that out?
Absolutely. So his version of the Undying Lands actually was fairy, the land of fairy. So what he was trying to do And I really get this sense from him. And I think a lot of people really like J.R.R. Tolkien as a person, you know, as a soul. Like, they would want to hang out with him and they would want him to be their grandfather. He has this type of way about him that shows that he knows more than he says. And I think that he put those messages in his books. I think he reached a point of being at peace with death and seeing it as a total joy. And he was a man of faith. He was a Catholic, as we know. But I do believe that he took in his Catholicism in a way that was more of a mystical, spiritual experience that led him to knowing, not just faith. And he wasn't really necessarily tied to the organizations in that sense, but he truly had a knowing that after this physical life, this physical world, we go into this realm. If you don't have things that tie you down still and you have to work out your business, we go into this realm of complete bliss where anything that you desire and dream can happen. And that was what the Undying Lands were kind of a symbol of, is that completion of feeling like you can let go of that physical life and enter into the state of just total relaxation, bliss, peace, and enjoy a experience in your consciousness like a dream that just goes on. And because you don't have karmic ties, you're not pulled into fixing problems and coming up with solutions and things like that. And you don't forget who you are. You already know that you're part of all. So I see the Undying Lands in that way, that the Hall of Mandros, when the elves go and they're supposed to wait before they enter into the Undying Lands, the Hall of Mandros is kind of that place of, because it contains the weavings of the world, so it basically is that place of reflection. And that is where it's decided upon, can you enter into the Undying Lands, or do you have to be sent back to Middle Earth to finish some unfinished business? And I think Tolkien had that faith that was wrapped around his Catholicism, but also had a deeper spiritual awakening within himself. And that's where I am. That's where I am, as far as I just have this faith and this, and it's more than just optimism. It's not hope. It's a knowing deep inside that the Undying Lands contains all that you desire, but there's steps to get there, in a sense. If you truly want to, get on the Elven ship, as that metaphor, you have to be able to work on some things and get to the point of the conscious level where when you die, you can enter into there freely and easily. Because if you die at a lower state of consciousness and awareness, that can pull you back into the physical world where you still have to work on yourself. Because I believe that the prime consciousness and creator that we all come from is so loving of a source that really all this is about is really just experience, education, and growth. And I mean, that is the great joy, is that you're always given the opportunity to be a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And when you are a little bit better in terms of your consciousness and the way that you live your life, what happens is you experience a more joyful experience. I mean, being at a higher consciousness and being a peaceful person in this lifetime really doesn't make you a lot of enemies. You don't have a hard life. You have a very easygoing life, and it's really fun. That's how I see it.
Well, yeah, and you brought up some interesting things that I want to touch on. You brought up this concept of a higher entity. This is something that's not foreign to anybody today. We've talked about numerous religions and ideologies, and of course, religion today, specific religions today have become, forefront of many conversations. Whether you're for them, against them, they're in everything. But one way that I think many religions can be particularly tricky to deal with is that the concept of a higher power is a complex one, and one thing that a lot of people struggle with. And I think even and you can step in when I say this if you like, if you disagree. But I think one thing that a lot of people have a hard time with, and this kind of circles back to what we talked about earlier with the idea that who gives these individuals permission to have power over so many others. This idea that there is a higher entity than myself, and it's going to be benevolent. It's going to be out for my best interest. It is going to be looking out for me. It wants me to succeed. It wants me to be in a position to better myself. This is all part of a journey, and I'm working towards this oneness, this perfection that can only be achieved through a syncretism, a synthesis of all my experience and all the knowledge that I can gain through my experiences. It's a major issue that a lot of people have, and this is a question that many religions have attempted to tackle over time and still attempt to grapple with today, is this concept of God or the concept of a higher entity, and whether or not one can truly know the intentions of an entity. We as people hope and assume that those with power will be benevolent. We hope they will, but we can only assume and hope that they will until they do something otherwise. Now, many people, and we would call these people cynics, or a more dated term for them would be deists, even if they did believe in God, would posit that God or a higher entity may have created all that exists, but they have no intentions to interfere with it directly. That there is something that caused the existence of all that is and all that ever could be, but it doesn't. Now that it's created, it doesn't have any vested interest in its preservation. So I guess one of the things that I want to bring out here is, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this concept?
Never saw an outside God. There is no such thing of a being or an alien God or an entity making this universe. Science has shown, Tesla talked about it, all space is empty space, molecules that vibrate. We are really just energy. And everything is frequencies and vibrations and energy moving together, determining things. And that's why Tolkien's myth, his creation myth in the Silmarillion, is so amazing, because it talks about the idea of string theory and quantum physics and the idea of music being vibrations, creating the universe.
Right.
So
right.
I'm going to say in front of everybody, I don't believe in an outside deity. It doesn't make sense to me. There's no such thing as a deity with arms and legs creating this universe that creates stars and planets. It's consciousness. It's pure consciousness. And what is pure consciousness? Just thoughts. And when we strip away what are thoughts, it's really just energy moving in the universe, creating what it wants to see. We are all part of this collective mind that is dreaming of this reality. That's how I see God.
Now, one thing I do want to bring up as well. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people have heard before. You on your channel actually addressed an individual who much said the same thing. And he's a YouTuber as well. I actually tried to get him to come on here, but he never got back to me. I think you might know who I'm talking about, but if the listeners don't know, he refers to himself on YouTube as Morg Official.
Yes.
You now, both of you have said in your videos, and Morg has become quite the phenomenon. And I don't know whether it's his appearance or the fact that he talks about quantum theory and quantum mechanics, and the way that he attempts to simplify quantum mechanics, although simplify, a better word for it might be abstract, particularly useful to his argument, and then leave the rest. Now, now that may be critical of me, but having some cursory knowledge of many of the topics that he's talked about, I find it very interesting that he leaves out certain things in order to enhance his point and attempt to give himself some sense or some sort of legitimacy by pointing out some theories that people may not necessarily be familiar with without some cursory reading. He likes to quote the phenomenology of mind, but he leaves out key passages of it. I'm assuming you are passingly familiar with the phenomenology of mind by Hegel.
Yeah.
So one thing I have to ask is, you both have said that, and you phrased it a little bit differently. And if what I say when I quote him, rather paraphrase him, I should say, is not in line with what you said, or you feel it isn't, you can correct me. But he says that we are the universe experiencing itself through itself. You say that we as a collective are God, and we are experiencing ourselves through ourselves. Is that accurate for me is that an accurate comparison?
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, because the universe doesn't, space, the empty space and stars is not mind. It's created by the energy. So that's how I would see it. Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, one other thing that I want to bring out, this concept, as groundbreaking as it may seem, this idea that we are the universe experiencing ourselves through ourselves, is actually not a new concept. It's actually not a new concept. It's a very ancient concept. Numerous times on your channel, I've seen you say that there is something to be learned from the old wise masters. And you don't refer to them as the old wise masters, but Jack Gilbert, the poet, refers to the old philosophers as the old wise masters. And I like Jack Gilbert. Gilbert's a very interesting guy. But he refers to the old thinkers as the old wise masters. But you refer to them as the philosophers, the teachers, the old teachers. Which is spiritual teachers. Thing. I mean, teacher, master. The words, depending on the language you're in, they basically translate to the same thing. So one thing that I would like to bring up is a particular verse. And keep in mind, I myself am not a Christian. I do not identify particularly with any religion. But there is a very interesting quote that exists within the 82nd Psalm of the Bible. And it's one that's been particularly debated heavily amongst theologians for years. And it says, "Know ye are gods."
Yep.
It's the 82nd Psalm, verse 6. And then it goes on to talk about judges and passing laws on the earth, and these men have godlike power, and blah, 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 blah. But there's very specific verse that says, "Know ye are gods." And Jesus also refers to this in John, that we are gods. Now,
Jesus never came to be worshipped. He came to give that message to humanity. And this is something that has been going on ever since humanity has been here on earth. There has always been that message. Why? Because it helps them when they get off track, in the sense of when the dream becomes such a nightmare, people become so divided, and wars break out, and people are stringing people up and crucifying them. Jesus saw that, and he knew that he had to bring in that catalyst to wake them up a little bit, and he was successful. But in some people he wasn't, and that's exactly what that verse is about.
Now, one thing also I want to bring forward, and I want to get your take on this, because this is my personal thought on religion. Years of studying, years of reading. I've got a master's in history. Okay, I've had to study every religion you can possibly think of. Basically, if it ain't brand new, I've read about it. I've read the text. I know what. I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt. My interpretation, my thought about God or gods or whatever higher entity people want to identify them as, is that God, for me, is the removal of responsibility and agency for man. And when I say that, I mean that men and humanity in general wants and needs there to be something higher than themselves so that we might have someone to blame, but we might also exonerate ourselves of responsibility. If human beings truly believed that they were gods and that they were responsible for the entirety of their universe and the way that it was constructed and how things are in their day-to-day life, if they didn't have to pray to themselves, and if they had to look to themselves, they would have to be responsible.
Exactly.
That's how I've always sort of viewed it, and I kind of want to get your take on that. How do you feel about that?
I absolutely agree with you. And who started the idea of personal responsibility? It was the priesthood, because they made people go to them, confess their sins, pay, give, it's in Genesis, pay money or jewelry to the priests that were in the tabernacle. Yeah. And so
or sacrifice.
It was men at lower states of their awakening, okay? So they were not enlightened in this sense. They were not aware of this. They heard the messages coming from the prophets and the messengers, and they interpreted it as there's something out there, and we're going to be the middleman, and we're going to make people come to us, and we're going to rule this world in a sense. We're going to make people feel guilty or bad, and they're only going to be able to confess their sins and pay us, and that's how we're going to get them to have salvation. And that is exactly the opposite of what Jesus taught, and that's exactly that was the opposite of how the messages were revealed. But it's mistranslation and misinterpretation that happens. So absolutely, the organized religions, they need a change, they need to update, we need to evolve to the idea that we are seeing ourselves as one, and that's what I talk about in my videos about unity consciousness. I believe that if we all know that we are gods, in a sense, or we are part of the collective mind, I believe, too, that we will take personal responsibility about what dream we want to see next. How far do we want to see this species go? We do want flying cars and beautiful futuristic cities, because it's 2018. We should have that by now. But that's the thing, is that we need more people to awaken to that idea so that they can start taking personal responsibility and start to raise their consciousness and their awareness of what they're doing in their own life. And we also have to get those that are sitting at the top of the power structures, and they have to awaken as well, so that they become personally responsible and stop just hoarding gold, because that's what they want to experience. They should be looking for something more. Can I say something about morgue official? Can we go back to that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. You can say whatever you want.
Just because I have the opportunity, and what you just taught me right there, so thank you for this lesson, is that somebody might see my response to him in that kind of way. We are extremely similar in a lot of ways, and our ideas are very, very similar, and that's actually why I was kind of looking at his videos and observing it. He's coming from a place of more, so we're both wanting the same thing. Morg and I are wanting to see a rise in consciousness of humanity. We want to see that. But Morg is coming from the place of make people feel that they're doing something wrong, or divide people in a sense of, the Hyperions from those who are not Hyperions. And
right,
my method is more, he does that in his videos. My method is more about bringing people together. So in a sense, my method is, so we're both coming at it from the same place, what we want as far as the destination, but my method is to make people, I guess, understand their unity to each other, so that there isn't that division that's created. I don't want to see humanity divided from Hyperions from others. I want Christians to understand that they are Hyperions, and the idea that Hyperion is a Greek term for just, thinking higher order things and higher order, what is it? It's like going above beyond your normal state of thinking. So that's what I'm trying to do. So I guess that's the only difference is I wanted to speak out about that because he kind of said, oh, if you're an intuitive, if you're a sensor, if you're this, you're not a Hyperion. And so I am an intuitive and I am a sensor. And so that's not right for him to say. And I guess that was the only issue I had with him. But we are very, very similar.
Right. And when you refer to, when he refers to Hyperion, this is of course, a reference to the Greek. Well, he may not be referencing it specifically, but the term Hyperion is also a reference to the Greek god Hyperion.
Yeah.
Who is
and
the
isn't
god
it a comic book too?
I believe that there is a comic book called Conan that refers to a place called Hyperia.
Yeah,
something
and then
like
the Hyperions live there, and they're supposed to be
gods,
like and
something like that. But Hyperion.
See, I just don't want to divide people.
Yeah, he's one of the 12 Titan children of Gaia and Uranus. They refer to him as the High One, but not because necessarily he is enlightened. It's simply because he's God-like. He's often referred to as a god of light because he's very much he's tied to Helios. Helios is the god of the sun. But
now that I would like with Morg Official, but he's talking more about math and he's getting into a very, very concrete, logical, non-emotional. People can take it the wrong way, and that was my fear, and that's why I wanted to speak about that.
I think it's only fair that I devil's advocate this, since Morg is not here. I'd like to take the moment to devil's advocate, and I would say that I can't say that I know his mind, but I would say that his argument would likely be that the reason he is speaking in terms of the mathematical form is because that is the language in which he is trying to communicate in. And I think he would see that not as the absence of emotion, but emotion as being a variable of a larger equation that is existence.
I can see that too, but people maybe would not be able to interpret that. I like to, when I think about things, I take in all aspects of people's, how they can perceive things. So my fear is that the masses that are all at different levels of consciousness, understanding, and education and all that would actually perceive it a little bit differently. But I definitely see where you're coming from. And I guess his argument would be he wouldn't want those as Hyperions. I don't know. I would love to talk to him.
I would love to talk to him too. But there seems to be a large number of people that he doesn't want to be Hyperions as well. So, I've seen a number of his videos that he seems to say that there's a whole lot of people. He refers a lot to the herd mentality, and this is nothing new. This is not something that is, as cutting edge as Morg wants to be. And this is not a slam on Morg at all. And Morg, if you are listening and you think it is, my apologies. But as cutting edge as you think that is, it's really not a new concept. It is at the heart of anarchism, which predates him by a great many years. And
that's why I kind of said the Illuminati. Because they were anarchists.
Something else I wanted to get to. I'm glad you brought that up, man. We are trending here. We're going places here. We're going in the right direction here. I noticed that you mentioned the Illuminati, and he mentions the Illuminati. There's a lot of people that mention the Illuminati, and I'm curious. I'm always curious when people bring up the Illuminati. They are often referred to as the spooky boogeyman. The spooky New World Order, puppeteers of things, when in reality their beginnings are extraordinarily humble. The term Illuminati referred to specifically groups of people who actually found themselves persecuted by the church for their beliefs, mainly because they were putting stock in science. They were attempting to explain the universe outside of theology, and at that time, that was considered incredibly radical for the time that they were in. So the Illuminati refers to almost a fraternity of sorts of people who found themselves persecuted. Of course, Galileo is often referred to as the first member of this group because he is actually, blacklisted, as it were, by the church for his beliefs. How dare he, look through his telescope and use basic observation to figure things out. What was he thinking? But Galileo is often referred to as one of the first. And I've seen this mentioned numerous times, this concept of the New World Order, this concept of the Illuminati as these puppet string people. But I haven't seen a lot of evidence of this. So I'm curious as to what your opinion of the Illuminati is. Do you believe is this secret order of people whose sole purpose in existence is controlling the world and controlling currency and controlling basically everything?
Yes. So when you read about Adam Weishaupt, and you're right, it did have kind of a humble beginning in the sense that it was created in Bavaria, Austria, and they really truly wanted to get rid of divine rule. And they were doctors, lawyers, they were educated men that had money, had the resources, and they did not feel connection to the religious organizations that existed. They made and set out doctrines to get rid of religion, to get rid of divine rule. That part is not so bad, but there's a blind side to it. There's a blind side to it, that they were not able to understand some of the deeper messages within religion. And instead of getting rid of religion, which causes fights, it causes conflict because people are part of those religions and they're not going to give up that very easily. That has caused the wars in the world for a long time. And also the Illuminati has been known to start revolutions. And so they have been they've been mischievous, they've been creating wars to get rid of religion. And it can be argued that that's what's going on today. My concept of them is that they are coming from a place of they're not seeing that other side. They're coming from a place of being blindsided in the sense of what religion could be or how humanity is evolving. The Illuminati, they are polymaths. They are the skull and bones. They have gone to all the Ivy League colleges. They are extremely intelligent on paper and resume. They are at head of corporations and in control of human organizations in this world. They are extremely educated, extremely intelligent, but what they lack is a spiritual understanding. And it's funny because they use the third eye as their kind of symbol, because they use the New Age and spirituality movement to kind of bring about a change that they wish to see. I'm getting ready to do a video about the light and dark side of the Illuminati because I am also not about having the Illuminati be looked at as monsters and, darkness and, fear-based understanding of them. I want people to see who they are. I kind of want to work with them because I feel that we cannot, as a species, really move forward without them. We really can't because they have the money. They are in control of the corporations. Unless there's going to be a huge, another revolution. I mean, I think we can move past that. I think what we can do is reach an understanding because where they are coming from is they see the masses as uneducated and they see them as the herds that they have to guide. That's how they see the masses. That's who they are. So they're not evil. They lack faith in both the understanding of spirituality in a sense, of a deeper sense of what the religions were trying to teach, and faith in humanity. They do not believe that humans can control themselves. They're doing everything in their power to be their masters because they want to preserve the human species, but they believe that humans have to be controlled. And I'm on the opposite side. Humans do not have to be controlled. In fact, they're evolving to a place where they can be sovereign beings I believe that. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it comes from the future, and I came back. I don't know, but I have this belief that we can be sovereign beings. Look at me. I'm on this earth right now, and I have this following of people that are kind of awakening to that. So I believe it can happen. I've seen it. And I want the Illuminati to know they can stop the control in that sense. Maybe get a little more faith in their fellow beings.
So one thing that always comes up with the Illuminati is that they're these incredible, powerful people, that they're a part of an elite club. But the problem with the Illuminati is that despite their humble beginnings and despite many of their boastful claims, some of the things that they've taken claim for throughout history, that they've tried to take credit for throughout history, they don't have any evidence for taking credit for it. You mentioned revolution. One of the major things that the Illuminati claim to have been part of, sort of spearheading was the French Revolution.
The French,
Yeah, but unfortunately, the Illuminati is almost completely dissolved by the time the French Revolution takes place. They're largely scattered, and
so
the ones that are kind of together, well, they're largely scattered by the time this takes place, and they are scattered predominantly because they are out doing what their original mission was. The original mission of the Illuminati, when they established themselves as a fraternity, was to gather as much knowledge and as many different perspectives as they possibly could from all the sciences that man had created, in the hopes that they could create new sciences, and in the hopes that they could discover the secrets of the universe, and that they could ascertain the true nature of God and the universe itself. Largely individuals who were associated with the Illuminati actually weren't all that wealthy in their outset. Many of them had to get sponsorships from people, and they had to get patrons. And these patrons tended to be people who were admirers of their work, that were admirers of their translations. Many of them did translations of Voltaire and numerous other, well-established philosophers of the day. But one thing that is often tied to the Illuminati is this idea that they are this massive organization that has the capability and the ability to spark revolution. But the problem with this theory is that it is largely based on the idea that they are, in fact, responsible for the French Revolution, when in fact the French Revolution is spearheaded by a number of different groups. Among them are the common folk, who grew tired of Napoleon's expensive wars, the principalities who surround France at this time, namely the Germanic states, as well as Belgium, Poland, and the Netherlands, who all really get tired of Napoleon conscripting their citizenry. And in addition to that, the rise of the Prussian state, as well as the strengthening of Russia as a power, and Napoleon's really his loss of grip on power, thanks to the rise of the British as a naval power. So all of these factors key into the French Revolution. But the thing that really sets it over the top, the thing that really sets the French Revolution over the top, is a famine that is actually not caused by war, but is actually caused by the fact that so much of their food had been harvested too early for Napoleon's conflicts that ultimately, not Napoleon's conflicts specifically, because this is right before him, but the king's conflicts and his attempts at colonialism, all of their food's being shipped to all these different places, and the people are starving whilst the king and the queen are kind of just fine dining, enjoying life as they were wont to do in the time in which they were alive. This prompted the citizenry, led by groups such as the Jacobins and even the Jesuit priesthood order, to plot their assassination, which they do. They succeed, and this sparks revolution. After many of their leaders actually get caught in the attempt, they do end up succeeding in killing the king and the queen. They behead them, and then you have Robespierre, and then eventually the rise of Napoleon, who is seen as the restorer of France. But the problem that I have with the Illuminati theory as being these string pullers is that I think we give them far too much credit. Many of them are not near as powerful as we would led to believe. Now, the Skull and Bones organization is not the Illuminati, but it is a fraternal order, much like the Masonic order, and it does hold some very powerful, very powerful alumni. Among them, we have the former president, George W. Bush, was a Skull and Bones. His father, I believe, is also a Skull and Bones. There's a number of people. I actually believe Dick Cheney was also a Skull and Bones. But nonetheless, there are a number of people from power who've been in seats of power who were Skull and Bones. There are also a number of people who claim to be members of the Illuminati in powerful places. However, the problem with that is many of them couldn't tell you a thing about the Illuminati, even if they wanted to, because a lot of their credos, a lot of their texts are lost, and the ones that aren't tend to be in French or Latin. And it's not a language that a lot of even educated people even speak anymore outside of certain scholarly circles who are actually studying this subject. So for me, I find it very problematic. I also find it very problematic. So it's become religion. Essentially, right? But I find it problematic as well that, you, Morgue, and, not just Morgue official, but other people as well, I can see where you are coming from. But I've seen this song and dance before with the Illuminati as being this, they're the boogeymen. They're super smart. They've got all this knowledge that they're not sharing with everybody else. But, that's not really accurate because they shared loads of information with loads of people. And they actually kind of just fall apart. They kind of fall apart later on. In the late 1780s, and they fall apart not even because of conflict. They fall apart because there's a change in philosophy. You see the Enlightenment, and then there's the Second Great Awakening. History has such interesting trends that push and pull people in all these different directions. And then you even have the advent of Romanticism, which you would have thought would have driven people. Yeah, you would have thought that would have pulled people towards what the initial goals of the Illuminati is, but instead it actually pulled them in a much different direction. Romantics would not have jived with the Illuminati in any way, shape, or form, because the Illuminati were all about quantifying and quantitating knowledge, whereas the Romantic is not concerned with that. He is concerned with finding this deeper meaning, this deeper purpose, this deeper relationship with himself and with the world around him.
Yes.
And I think that's I think that's where you, and even though Morgue Official tries to be very reasonable and logical and almost, calculating, even he is deep down a romantic because he is still seeing the world from that same perspective as the Romantic. Even though he's attempting to quantitate and qualify things, he's still doing it from the perspective of the Romantic. And the key example of this that I will point out is in his discussion of consciousness. He basically rips directly from the phenomenology of mind in which Hegel is describing the idea that human beings and their consciousness are not the consciousness is not tied to the body. This was a very abstract idea at the time because the idea was originally that you had a soul. And when your body died, your soul might separate from it. But until then, they're one and the same. They're together. The soul is this powerful engine, and it powers the body. Hegel got away from that. He says that the soul is not the engine that powers the body. The soul can exist outside of the body. The soul can exist independent of the body, and the body is not required. There can be a soul and no body. The body can operate and do its day-to-day functions because it is a machine, essentially. It's a machine. The brain will still tell your body what to do because your soul and your consciousness are not your brain. They're not even the idea that Hegel posited was that those things are not connected. That the soul, the mental capacity that an individual has is not tied to their brain. Because if it was, it would die when you died. That would make it an organic thing. Because your brain is organic. So and this is a very romantic idea, despite the fact that people are going, that's gross. You know,
right.
I don't want to think about my gushy, you know, brain. It is a very romantic idea because
you're right.
It posits the idea. Yeah, it posits the idea that there is an existence within. There is something in you that is special that exists without you here, without your physical form. There is something else there. And Hegel's attempt to define this and quantify this, despite it being a calculation on his part, is not even an attempt to really, verify you had a soul or you had a mind, because contrary to what Morgan Fischel would probably have you believe, one of the things that he locks out of his description of the phenomenology of mind is that Hegel is actually tackling the idea of religion. He himself is Christian, and he is attempting to grapple with this concept of the spirit, of the soul, and where it comes from and what its source is and what he's going to do with it, because he is trying to figure it out. He's trying to understand what it is. That is his goal. And so what I guess I got to ask you at this point is, how do you feel about, the concept of the soul? Is the soul, or this essence that we carry around with us, is it, to something higher than ourselves? Is it part of this great collective that you mentioned, or is it something that we can't really quantify, that exists in a place where we can't really qualify it accurately enough yet?
How about all of the above? Seriously,
that's what's so that's what's so interesting about this. I hear people quote a lot of philosophers, and I hear them talk about the phenomenology of mind and Hegel, and then they quote Ovid, and then they talk about Franz Kafka and the Metamorphosis, and then they cite the great god Pan, and then they talk about this, and they try to qualify it, quantify it, quantitate it, and in reality, even though Hegel himself was trying to do this, the goal in the end was never to really qualify it. For Hegel, he didn't need to qualify it; he was just trying to say that it was there.
I think that's why. I have a memory when I was younger. As soon as I learned about the Hegel's philosophy on religion, the thesis and antithesis, and the antithesis, I just remember I had this memory of me saying that I believe, I connect to that, I resonate with that. So I actually do like Hegel, and I believe that, like you said, that Hegel was trying to understand more about how the collective kind of moves together throughout history and how they learn from their mistakes, and then they evolve, and then they have, a war or conflict, and they learn, and then they move on. So I absolutely do agree with that. Like I said, it's all of the above. I think that a soul is an individual part of ourselves, as designed, unique sparks of the divine. And I also think that we have a collective soul as well. And the collective soul is more interested in how you are part of a species and where the species goes. The personal soul is only interested in the enlightenment of that particular divine spark. So that can be ego, because if you're not thinking about the collective soul, then you don't really care about how a species moves. So my concern is when people get stuck in only the personal soul, because we do have a collective soul as well. It's all of the above. Does that make sense?
So, no. I just wanted to see how much we could flesh that out. Because a lot of people, and for those of you not familiar with Hegel, if you're out there watching videos about Hegel and you're not familiar with Hegel, I recommend picking up a copy of some of Hegel's work, preferably translated from German. Don't read it in German like I had to, because you just start crying. Yeah. You will, because that's what I did. But the phenomenology of mind, it's also translated as the phenomenology of spirit, because they use the word Geist, and Geist has a dual translation for the time in which it was written. But this is Hegel's attempts to grapple with concepts within religion that he felt weren't being addressed, and the predominant one that he wanted to really conquer and grapple with ultimately is the concept of consciousness and spirit. And this was very important to him because at the time you have the rise of people who are looking to the best way to say it is they're looking to take science, take philosophy, and say that it's completely and utterly separate from religion, which is something that's actually taking place today, and brings me to my next question for you: is do you think that religion is a science, or do you think that the two are two different things? Do you think science and religion are separate? Are they at odds with one another? Can there be a synthesis? What do you think about that?
Well, look at some of the scientists that actually do have some type of spirituality or religious background, and they'll even say that their interest in science is to understand the miracles or the creation of God, of what they believe God is. Carl Sagan even said that, basically spirituality and science is not mutually exclusive, that you can have both. And Einstein even said that, religion and spirituality go together, and if they don't, they're lame. They miss out part. So that's the whole thing, is that religion and science have been at war with each other, yet they are, and that's because they're coming from different points of the spectrum, where you have the physical world, because the science is really interested in the physical world, and you have the religion, which is interested in the immaterial world that we cannot see and that we just feel and we sense. So they're coming at, they're on completely different spectrums, but they're on the same line. They're on the same linear line. That's how I see it, that they're both trying to answer about our origins and where we are going and what is all of this. Why do I suffer? Why do I experience what I experience? So I do not think that they are, I know that they have been at war, and that is kind of, that's a little bit of Illuminati's part in our history. You say that they're not powerful. I believe that they have evolved to be more powerful. I think that they have gained a lot of numbers just because of being able to make religion look as nasty as it has become. I think that they have evolved and they have gotten bigger, and the influence is bigger, and that's why people are seeing them more and more, in Hollywood and flashing the signs and everything like that. And they have a book now too.
One thing I want to say towards that is, you say that religion is being made ugly to people, that people are disenfranchised from it. But I think ultimately religion, the major problem with it is that it's not a problem with religion. There's never been a problem with religion. And before you say anything, because I know that this can be a very difficult concept for people, but I think you'll agree with me. There's never been a problem with religion. The problem has always been and always will be people and how they are interpreting it and how they are practicing it. There's never been a problem with any religion that's ever existed. No religion in and of itself will ever be evil. It's the people that espouse it and the people who use it to their own ends that make it evil. With that being said, I think that recent events have shown that it's not really there's not been any need for any behind-the-scenes string pulling. A lot of these religious organizations that have disenfranchised people have done it all on their own, the way that they have acted towards people. And I'll give you a prime example of this is the massive scandal that erupted with the Catholic Church not long ago when we found out that there were a slew of sexual assaults that were being covered up by their organization, that they knew about, that they were paying people to be quiet about. And this is not conspiracy. It's not conjecture. It happened. We know it happened. It came out in the news. People lost their jobs over it. The Pope had to talk about it. It was a huge deal. It was a huge scandal. And so I think to say that we should attribute the almost downfall of modern-day religion to any one group would be the height of fallacy and lunacy, because these organizations have been doing this to themselves for years. And I can give more examples. You look at the tension that exists, and it has existed for years, between Buddhists, Hindus, and Muslims in India. There's a lot of tension that is in those regions that has disenfranchised people in one of the most populous areas of the world from religion. People are dropping in record numbers from 3 major religions in one part of the world because they're incredibly disenfranchised by how those people treat one another, but also the conflict in their country. So I think these organizations are doing that all on their own. These religions are shooting themselves in the foot. They've gotten away from their original goals to really just kind of falling in on themselves. And
it's
true.
I
mean, I think we can both agree that's kind of where things are going right now.
Yeah, it's a lack of education as well. Education is key. Malala said, kill a terrorist with a gun and you just killed the terrorist. But if you actually educate the people, you do not have terrorists in the future because they have higher order thinking. They have critical skills that they develop within education. And a lot of these second world, third world countries, they do not prioritize higher order education. A lot of them, a lot of people in those countries, they do go to school and they do learn, and those are the peaceful Muslims, Buddhists, so on. Education is tied to religion as well. If you do not have critical thinking skills and higher order thinking, and you don't read and you don't expand your mind, then you will only be moving from the emotions. And that is the thing. You have to have a balance of logic and emotions, because that causes, the zealot tree that we see in religion today. And that is absolutely what I agree with. And I believe it's both. We have organizations that work to secure land and resources, so they fund wars, or they set out to destabilize areas, and then causes
we've got
conflict.
Governments, but we've got governments run by lobbyists.
So it's both. Right. So it's both. So it's the individuals who are not able to think with their logic about religion, and only through their emotional faith. And then you have also governments that are trying to start things because they want to take over land and resources. So it really is both. I know I'm saying that a lot in the interview, but I see it from both sides. I've always been able to write papers in that sense. I'm really bad at persuasive papers because I see from the cons and the pros.
One thing I want to refer to, because we got about 15 minutes, and I want to see what you think about this. You're pretty well read, but one thing that's always stuck with me, and I don't know how familiar you are with it. I'm going to assume that you've heard it, but Charlie Chaplin's final speech from The Great Dictator.
Oh, I love it.
I don't know how familiar you are with it, but he says in it that we don't want to haze and despise one another. In this world, there is room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, and has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much, feel too little. More than machinery, We need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. And without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. This speech was actually blacklisted for a long time and didn't really get aired during the time that it came out. It was seen as a massive affront politically in the United States because Charlie Chaplin was a socialist at the time. Well, actually, was identified as a communist. But this speech was his slam piece of Hitler and dictatorships and fascism. His outcry towards what he saw as a world going in the wrong direction. I think that his speech still rings true today, but I think the thing that really sticks out, I think you'll agree with me, is that in this world there is room for everyone. The good earth is rich, provide for everyone. The way of life can be beautiful and free, but we lost the way. I think that really has been the highlight of our interview. Wouldn't you say?
I would say, yes. I mean, that is my goal. So I am happy that you draw that connection, because that's exactly what I am trying to do with my channel, High Elven Wisdom on YouTube, is to bring that to surface, to allow humans to know that they can aspire to more. And the reason why people love the elves so much of Tolkien is because they reflect that kind of image of themselves.
Now, I do want to say a couple more things. I want to say one more thing about elves and Tolkien, and then I want to open things up a little bit more and talk a little bit about what you're working on. With our last 10 minutes or so, I want to talk about more about what you're working on. Just one thing I want to say about the elves and Tolkien is that, and I noticed you didn't bring this up, and I definitely want to have you back on. We can talk about it some more. Personally, if you want to talk to a person to person, you're welcome to message me. But one thing I noticed about the elves and Tolkien is that the elves represent something very specific, and they represent the potential that people had, but what happened when they failed to reach it. The elves are a failing civilization. It's mentioned numerous times in the Lord of the Rings that they are leaving the lands. They are leaving these lands. Their time is over. The time is up. The elves that stay are now losing their vitality. They're not as pure. They're not living as long as they used to, and that's why they have to go to these undying lands, because their time is up. So something that I just wanted to bring to the forefront and get your take on real quick is what do you feel about that?
Well, what's your definition of success? I mean, because leaving the Middle Earth, leaving and losing their physical bodies and moving on to the undying lands, to me doesn't symbolize their failure, because I feel that they have been successful in the sense that they were counselors and guides to humanity. We see that within, where Gandalf is part of the White, or goes to the White Council. And so the definition of success is, I think what Tolkien was trying to show is that a great civilization does not have to be so successful in the idea that they stay in power, they conquer others, they master others. But a great civilization, or an end to their story, is the idea that they have a legacy to leave behind. So you have now the hobbits, like Samwise, who are like, oh, the elves, I feel so sad that the elves are leaving. So the elves symbolize that part of the divine that is being left in Middle Earth, of the light of Eru Iluvatar. So that's where I feel that the elves were successful, is in the sense that they were inspiration, and they inspired the humans, they inspired the dwarves. You have Gimli, who asked for a lock of Galadriel's hair. So obviously there's this element of looking.
There was a little something extra to that, but yeah, there was a little something extra to that. He had an infatuation,
the elves are inspiration.
Well, he was inspired just in a different way. But with our last few minutes, He was inspired in a much different way. But with our last few minutes here, we got about 9 minutes left here on our interview together. You've got your YouTube channel, High Elven Wisdom. You got your Facebook page, and I mentioned before the show, you've got a elvenwisdomblog.wordpress.com where you've got some stuff written up, and I'm assuming that's your website. Is there anywhere else following you? And are you writing any books? Are you working on anything else that the audience needs to know about?
Yes. So you can follow me on Twitter. I have a High Elven Wisdom there. I also have Instagram, which I show my daily life in a sense, and how somebody lives like an elf. The idea of an otherkin. Like, how do you decide to embrace that elven nature into your life? So I show that on Instagram with photos, and then I'm also starting to work on a book. So I'm glad you asked. I'm working on it right now, but basically it is going to be about the human evolution through the higher soul. So utilizing what we know about the higher self and the higher soul, getting in touch with that, and then watching the human species evolve. So I am working on a book right now.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to have you back on here when you get a book, probably before then, hopefully before then. Hopefully we can get you back on here before then, because I feel like we left a lot on the table to talk about. So we had a lot to talk about, but we got through all the questions and we got through a lot of stuff. We even chucked in a few extra questions. So you've got your High Elven Wisdom Facebook, Twitter. You've got your website. You're working on a book. Is there anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Yes, I also do personal sessions with people. So I meet them on Skype and I read their energy and see where they're at, consciously, what's holding them back in their life. So I am willing to meet with people online and do that. If you are interested in getting in contact with me, you just have to email me and we set up appointments. It's elvenlightpath@hotmail.com. I also have Facebook groups where if you resonate with things I say, if you feel like an elf, if you feel you have a past life of being an elf, if you love nature, if you believe in humanity's evolution and you just really want that inspiration and want those people around you, then you can join the Elven Light Path group online, and we have about 1,400 members right now. And you can meet other elven souls.
Quite a number. And tell us a little bit, what can people expect from you in the future? What can we expect to see from you, Kimberell, Eventide, and High Elven Wisdom? Where do you see this going?
Well, I hope that I can reach a lot more people than I'm reaching right now. I'm a lot like Pythagoras in the idea that I am not so interested in one-on-one teaching as I am in reaching out to a larger audience. So I love, I used to teach in the classroom and I used to be a teacher, and I found out that what I really want to do is reach a lot more people. So basically what you're going to see in the future of me is just making a lot more YouTube videos and hopefully even traveling and maybe doing some conventions where I can, have workshops and talk to people face to face and, just hold speeches in that sense of just being able to connect with people more face to face rather than what YouTube allows me to. So that's really kind of where I see myself going. I hope for the future.
All right. Well, is there, we got a few minutes left. We did really good. We got through a lot of stuff, pretty quick. I feel like we tackled a lot of heavy material too. Is there anything that you think would be helpful to the listeners to read if they want to seek enlightenment and they want to seek, to better themselves? what sort of things would you recommend that they do? What do you think is the correct steps towards self-discovery as far as, reading and practice? What can they do?
I would say don't come to anything with judgments. And what that really means is that when you open a book, when you look at religious texts or non-religious texts, whenever you're reading, try to put yourself in the shoes of the author and who's writing those messages, and try to understand their intention and their desire to get this message across. That puts you at a state of where you're out of your subjective ego and you're starting to understand people more. And that's what I try to do with everything that I read and get involved with. And it's really helped practice this objectivism, which is where you get out of your subjective self and you're objective. And that's, the elves of Tolkien were very good with that. That's kind of why they were, the White Council and everything, because being at an objective place allows you to be more fair in your judgments, and you're not coming from a place of ignorance and just your emotional opinion. And I think that this world needs a lot more of that, because we instantly judge others when we hear things and and read things. And I think people need to come from a place of the objective self, and I think that will help people understand what they're reading more and what they're listening to more. I see a lot of it on my YouTube, and I try not to comment about it, but people sometimes focus on me, and I want them to focus on my messages. And so that's kind of what I just want people to start doing is to get in touch with their objective self rather than their subjective self. And you have to have a balance. I mean, you can't live this world as an objective person all the time, but you can reach a great balance, and that allows you to be less emotional and reactionary towards things. I hope that helps.
Well, yeah, I think we left people in the right direction. Well, listen, Kimbrough, this has been a great interview. I got one more question. This is the easiest question you're going to answer this whole time. Easiest one. You want to come back on the show?
Yes, of course.
We're going to have to set that up. Let's get your people talking to my people, and when I say that, I mean let's get you talking to me. Let's work this out down the line. I don't know. You seem like you're pretty busy. I got a lot going on too, but let's talk it over. Let's see what you got going on in the next couple of weeks. I definitely want to have you back on here. I think there's a lot more that we can talk about. I think people are going to have enjoyed this interview, and I hope it definitely helps you. I wish you the best. I hope everybody is enjoying what you're doing. You seem to be going for the right thing, and I definitely like to give people their due. Maybe down the line we can get Morgue Official to come on here and talk too. But we'll see what happens.
I would love to. I'd like to heal him a little bit. Some of his past.
Well,
his past trauma with Christian family.
We could definitely have him on and talk about that if he ever responds to anything I ever say. I don't know. He must be really, really busy. I don't know. But at the very least, maybe we can get you back on here and we can talk about it, and maybe he'll listen. But excellent. I'm going to let you go. Feel free to message me on Messenger, and we can hash out the details.
I'm going to leave you with an Elvish saying.
All right.
Ilen sila omen televo, which means the stars shine at the hour of our meeting. So that's the Elvish saying.
Sounds pretty good to me. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go, and just go ahead and message me, and we'll hash out the details.
Excellent. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and see you guys next time for the Bareback Facts. I'm out of here. Yeah.